This is a conference.
We can get started.
Okay. All right, so we'll get started now and wait for the rest to join us as we go along. Welcome everyone to the first gender webinar by the Jobtech Alliance. We are incredibly thrilled to have you join us today on this important discussion on creating a more inclusive ecosystem that truly supports women in the job tech sector across Africa. So my name is Phoebe Kiboi. I am the BFA Global Gender Lead and a member of the Jobtech Alliance team, a joint collaboration between Shikoh and BFA Global. My colleague Janet will introduce herself later in the session. So on this topic today, we have a fantastic lineup of guests and panelists, starting with Dr. Shikoh Gitau, who will have the opening remarks, sharing her research and insights on the specific obstacles and opportunities for women across Africa who are looking to leverage job tech. Then we have Janet Wandia, who will lead a diverse panel to discuss practical steps our ecosystem can take to accelerate the support of women in job tech. However, before we jump in, I wanted to provide a little bit of a background on the Jobtech Alliance and why it is that we're hosting this webinar today. So the Jobtech Alliance is an ecosystem building initiative that's focused on inclusive job tech platforms across Africa. This covers a wide range of organizations, from gig platforms, job matching platforms, to e-commerce marketplaces and more. We currently support a portfolio of over 20 platforms and a growing community of 100+ job tech platform members, in addition to a nearly 1,000 strong ecosystem membership. Our aim through the Alliance is to help these platforms to grow and better connect people to work opportunities that build livelihood. So if you want to see more about the people on our platforms, the ones that we're supporting, our membership, and the work that we do, feel free to have a look at our website, which will be shared later in the chat for all of you to have a view. Now, the job tech space has been steadily growing across Africa in recent years, and we estimate that it's going to get to about 30 to 88 million Africans earning a living out of it by 2030. However, we have noticed some particular challenges that women face in accessing and benefiting from these opportunities. So in today's discussion, we want to dig slightly deeper into that, answering two main questions. One, what is the barrier that women are facing when engaging with job tech platforms? And also, what is the role of the job tech ecosystem in overcoming these barriers to allow women to gain more from this sector? We're looking forward to a thoughtful and solutions-oriented discussion on these crucial topics, and we want your contributions as well. So feel free to quickly add in on the chat who you are, what you do, and why this is exciting for you. And as we continue, feel free as well to just add in your questions and any thoughts you have on the topic, and someone from our team will either note them down or respond to them. We'll also have a Q&A at the end of the session where you'll be able to engage more directly with our speakers. So we encourage you to all remain till the end just so that you have that opportunity to talk to them one-on-one. Lastly, I ask that you kindly mute yourselves throughout the discussion today up until the point when we have the Q&A so that we can be able to hear our speakers a bit more clearly. So thank you for that. So to get us started, let me hand it over to Dr. Shikoh to discuss the challenges and opportunities for women in the digital space. So welcome, Dr. Shikoh.
Thank you, everyone. I apologize if there's any background noise. I'm taking this from a restaurant. So thank you so much to Jobtech for inviting me for this session. I want to talk about, funny enough, this morning I was speaking at the Fairworks conference that is also happening in Nairobi. And so this is like my platform livelihoods day. And so I just want to talk about what are the key components that we look out for as a company, and then dig into what are the gender components of these things that where women are being left behind and what we need to be able to do. So as introduced, my name is Dr. Shikoh Gitau. I'm the CEO of Qhala. We are a digital innovation lab. We are headquartered in Nairobi, but we work across the continent of Africa, and we have some work that we do in Eastern Asia. But our focus in Africa is in Africa, and we work to catalyze Africa's digital future. Within our piece of work, we work on something called the future of work. For us, the future of work means that it is based on the fact that by 2050, 1 of every 3 working adults of working age will be on the continent of Africa. We know that the future of work is going to be highly digital and highly distributed. So we know that we need to prepare for this future of work. And for us, future of work is beyond platforms as defined by the Jobtech Alliance, but it's made up of 3 core components. And we call them agency. Sorry, I'm referring to my notes, just a minute. So we refer to it as platforms as described here, skills, and agency. What are platforms? These are the enabling tools, channels, and tools and mechanics that people use to access work. And these are both algorithm-based, like the Ubers, the Glovos, that enable people to be able to access work. But this also can be platforms like social media, like Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook, where people use to source for work and find work. Number 2 is skills. We believe that skills, especially skills in the digital age, are of critical importance. And we've been working on a piece of work where we've been assessing what are the key skills that are needed on the continent to be able to be future ready and future proof the continent. We've realized there's so many digital skills that are being offered on the continent, but they're not future ready. So we keep telling people, stop teaching people to use Excel and HTML. Let's move to AI. And yes, people will frown about it. That was 3 years ago, but they're no longer frowning because they're saying what you said 3 years ago are actually coming to work. And the third one, which is critical, especially from a gender point of view, is agency. We realize because we're in a highly distributed, highly remote, and highly digital space, there's very little agency when it comes to people who are working in this space. Who is pushing for this? For agency, for these people, we always ask, who is the atwoli for gig workers, for platform workers? Who is fighting for them? Who is fighting for women who are getting work on WhatsApp and LinkedIn and then ending up being abused? So those are the questions that you keep asking ourselves. And those are the 3 components and the 3 lenses that we look when you're looking at the future of work. Over the past, as I mentioned, over the past 4 years, almost 5 years, we've been working on the future of work in our lab. And we realized that this is not something that is not going to go away. But how is it implicating on women. I'll point out to 3 different studies that we've worked on and how this is going to inform our discussion today. The first study we ran was in the middle of COVID. And if you remember, during COVID, lots of people, especially women, lost their formal jobs. And so they resorted to going online to be able to find work. We ran a study, what we're calling Snapchats on WhatsApp, and to find out what are women using, how women are using digital technology to find work and find livelihoods. And for that time, it was a matter of survival more than a matter of livelihood, which are 2 different things. Survival is, I want to be able to just make money to eat. Livelihoods is where I have a little bit more than enough and I'm able to make money and buy luxurious goods. And we found out that women had embraced online and digital work quite intensely. We found this woman who was making 70,000 shillings. At that time, it was almost 750 by the then exchange rate, about $750 a week. And this was in the middle of COVID. Why? Because COVID had opened up the fact that women especially can be able to work multiple jobs. And she was managing an Airbnb, she was selling stuff online, she was doing online writing, she was doing all these things. So we realized that digital platforms and platform livelihoods in itself was providing the women flexibility to be able to do what they want. And it was not just one woman. We did this not just in Nairobi, we did this across different rural areas. And we found out that women actually embracing this space. The one thing that lacked is agency. Nobody was fighting for them. Nobody was negotiating on their behalf. Nobody was speaking about the policies that needs to be put in place to do this. The second piece of study we did was in 2022, when we were trying to define what is the actual reach of digital work. And we're trying to understand if you were to be able to design a digital jobs program, how do we define it? We found some very, very interesting data that we can share on a different forum. But for this specific one, we found women actually were hiding themselves behind male names and sadly behind a different race. And they will never get a job on LinkedIn. From LinkedIn, I'll never get a job on Upwork, or I'll never get a job from Kenyan platforms. So I have to hide myself behind a man's name, which was pretty sad, to be honest. But once they did that, they were able to actually thrive. But on the positive side, we found that women were working in communes, in communities, where they were coming together, sourcing for work and distributing it within themselves, which was very encouraging because it is what we call chamas. But how are we going to utilize our chama Ubuntu mentality in a digital space? It's we source for work, we distribute it, deliver it, and split the money, which was a very interesting find for us, because when you think about digital work and the numbers that Janet has just spoken about, you realize that we count a single account, but that single account can be used by multiple people, something we call hidden hierarchies. Is that one account can be used by several people. And we found that women are usually underneath that account. They will never go upfront themselves as women. The third the third study we did is a study that we worked with the Jobtech Alliance, just to understand how are women embracing the digital space and how are they looking specifically at the area of agency. And we realized that women do want to come together. They do want to be able to negotiate together. They do want all these things. What do we do? So we ran a small experiment with by incubating what is called iWorkers.core. Please go and register there and see what we are talking about. It's a platform that is working towards curating all types of online and platform workers to be able to opportunities, and those opportunities means social protection mechanisms like insurance, like being able to buy your own equipment, like being able to report and find legal help, because these are the things that women are suffering in the digital space. So this platform is already up and running. We already have about 530 digital workers, primarily women, who are signing up. And we want over the next 18 months to see what are the needs of these women that can be addressed from a policy point of view and from a product point of view, so we can feedback on what the platform work is doing. In conclusion, we've talked about platform skills and agency. At the end of it, we need to be able to think about it from a human point of view. These are women, they are mothers, they are wives, they are children of other people. So we need to be able to think about it. It's not about numbers that specifically is what do they aspire and what do they need. And when we are looking at all our work, we're always thinking about this person that we are addressing. We want the numbers. We want to be able to report we have gotten all these jobs and we have placed these people. But what is the means to an end? And one of the key things that we found that sometimes we are very presumptive about what women actually want. So we actually have a paper that we call What Do Women Want? Women do want flexibility, but they also want money in their pocket. And I'll conclude with a saying of one of them who said, I want to be able to fund my lifestyle. That is what Platform Livelihoods is about. It's about aspiration and goals of these women. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shikoh. Those were great insights. I really like the way you broke it down between the platforms, the skills, and the agency, just kind of looking at the whole space and seeing where can we come in. One of the things that you've said that really got to me was a part of survival, not just the livelihood, how these platforms can also support in helping people survive beyond just increasing on their livelihoods, which I think is a really great angle to the work that is being done. Lastly, and the thing that we're constantly trying to do across our work is looking at the 3 areas. What are the barriers that women are facing? What are the needs that they have? But I like the last part as well, which is what are the aspirations of these women? How do we get them to where they want to be rather than just dealing with what they need at the moment now? So thank you so much for that. So to continue along this, I want to welcome Janet, who will be leading the panel and will introduce the panelist herself. Thank you so much and welcome, Janet.
Thank you, Phoebe, and thank you so much, Shikoh. Very interesting discussion points given there. So as we dive right in, I want to give a brief introduction of our panelists. So I'll start with Nadina. Nadina is a consultant with the World Bank, and during her career, she has been able to contribute to analysis and studies for a variety of organizations, including the European Union, European Commission, the Parliament, and the GIZ. And one of the key things key reasons why we invited her here is she has been part of writing a paper called Working Without Borders, which looks at online work and the life cycle of women in doing online freelancing work. She'll share some more insights later on. Anjali is another one of our panelists. She is a PhD researcher at the Fairwork Project based in Oxford, and she is a co-author of Gender and Platform Work report that Fairwork released late last year, which examines the gendered experiences of platform workers across 38 countries and over 190 platforms. So very rich insights expected there. Last but not least is Alem Abreha, who is a co-founder and CEO of GoodayOn. GoodayOn is what they like to call themselves a pink collar job matching platform. It's one of the companies that we have on our portfolio, and we're very excited to have the 3 of you be part of the panel. So if we can dive right in, I'll start off with you, Nadina. In your report, which I just mentioned earlier on, Working Without Borders, you have analyzed the opportunities that the gig economy provides for women. But even in line with what people just mentioned, that the future of talent is in Africa, I want you to just have a deeper overview of how is the general labor market and how has it been historically in terms of women participating in the labor market, and how is this shift changing with the rise of the gig economy?
Hi, Janet, and hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So that's a big question. So I'll take a step back and look first at the overall picture. Now, where are we when we talk about women participating in the labor market? Well, if we look at figures, recent and also for the past, let's say 10, 20 years, we see a persistent gap when we look at how women participate in the labor market versus how men participate in the labor market. If we look at the latest figures from the ILO, it's around 80% of men who participate in the labor market, but for women, that's only just above 50%. So imagine, how much talent is left outside of the labor market. That's one thing, and those are global figures. Second, if we look by continent and by region, we do see some differences. So if we look at Sub-Saharan Africa in particular, the gap is a bit lower than the global average. There are about 74% of men in the labor market who participate in the labor market, and about 61, 62% of women. So the gap is slower, but it's still there. Now, if we look at other regions, especially MENA and South Asia, there we see even greater gaps between men and women compared to the global average. So that's where we are standing in those terms. But these percentages, this gap in terms of percentages is just one part of the picture. When we talk about the gender gap, we also talk about discrepancies in the types of jobs performed, in earnings, in time spent on work, and a number of other things. And these are all, fueling this this phenomenon. Now, of course, digitalization and emerging technologies have been hailed as, a potential solution to this. And from our side at the World Bank and in my team, Solutions for Youth Employment, we set out to investigate how exactly certain trends in technological development might help address, this gender gap. And we looked at one particular development, and here I'm just going to, set some definitions so that we are on the same page. In our study that you just mentioned, Janet, Working Without Borders, we looked at one particular phenomenon, and that is online gig economy. And allow me to spend 2 seconds on this to explain what it is. I think Shikoh already mentioned some aspects of it, but for the sake of consistency, when we talk about online gig economy and online gig work, we refer to those types of jobs that can be performed completely remotely, online, independent of location, and that are intermediated by platforms. So this can mean, for instance, you are a writer and you want to offer your services, you go on a platform, you create a profile, and then you connect with clients from all over the world and deliver tasks for those clients. But there are a lot of other examples. We can also talk about software development. We can talk about graphic design, translation, digital marketing, and so on and so forth. So we looked at this particular trend, and we saw a couple of opportunities here for women. Let me name 3 perhaps of those. First, we saw that this online gig economy is growing rapidly. And we estimate that somewhere between 4 up to 12% of the global labor market has done at some point this type of work. So, if we think about the numbers, that's huge. Up to 12%, it means that we all know someone who has done that kind of work. Then the second aspect, there is a lot of flexibility in this. And I think, again, Shikoh referred to this briefly in her intervention. There is flexibility in where you work from and when you work. And this, especially for women, can be a game changer. And the third aspect, if we think about, societal norms and restrictions that women might face in accessing jobs on the local labor market, online gig work can actually be an empowering solution to go beyond that. You just need to have your computer, somewhere in your home, and then you can access these opportunities. Now, of course, there are a lot of risks associated with this development, and I can delve into them, but perhaps I stop here for now, and then we can pick up the conversation again.
Yes, thank you, Nadina. Seems like you have a lot to say, and I want to just shift the conversation a bit for Anjali's point of view. So Nadina, you've spoken about online type of work, and Anjali, I want you to touch on work performed offline. Do you think that emergence of job tech has led to a deepening of social inequities, or do you think this is a silver bullet and it's actually helping us solve some of these problems that we had?
Thank you. So I think we can all see and get excited by the potential job tech has to herald social and economic empowerment for women. And indeed, we come across stories about how the gig economy is one of the few sources of legitimate employment for women who do not quite fit traditional social norms. Like in Egypt, a lot of divorced women or single mothers are actually able to find work in the sector. We also see that because of the flexibility, it's really useful for any individuals, but these do tend to be women who have really heavy care responsibilities. So they can like balance having kids or elderly parents and taking care of them and get some money on the side. However, what it really comes down to is the quality of the job that people are doing, the quality of the work that they're doing. And what we have seen is that women are particularly vulnerable, not just to sexual and physical abuse, which they are, but also that they're getting into situations where they put a lot of pressure on them to perform unpaid work. We find that women tend to work in more private, hidden types of work, like domestic work, the beauty industry, the, caring, taking care of children and all of that. And so it's extremely hidden. It's not very public. And a lot of pressure can be put on them to be like, okay, you said you would clean the house. It's taking you 3 hours. That's probably because you're doing it too slowly. So then we'll only pay you for 1 hour. Similarly, they have very little social protections, which is a huge issue. So if a woman takes leave to take care of her sick child, what happens in the platform is she has to often just lose all her standing and she has to start from ground zero and rebuild her reputation so that she gets the good clients, so that she gets the higher wage. And so it places them at a disadvantage compared to their male colleagues. And that's why in the Fairwork Gender Platform Work Report, we had to conclude that the location-based platform work doesn't simply just reflect existing gender divides, but it can actually even amplify existing gender divides unless the quality and the fairness of the work improves.
Thanks, Anjali. While we're still at you, because I've heard you mention something that's very interesting for me. You mentioned that women participating in location-based platforms can increase the divide. Could we go deeper into that? One school of thought thinks that by women participating in this field, they're challenging the social norms. They're actually trying to do something that doesn't happen even offline. And on the other hand, you've mentioned that even those who participate, who manage to go in, they experience some barriers or some social challenges. So could you just dive deeper into that?
So I think there are 2 levels of barriers that women encounter when they do location-based work, particularly location-based work that is understood often as being male location-based works, for instance, ride-hailing or delivery. And what happens is, one is just the gender bias that is present in society. For instance, in Nigeria and the Philippines, so like very different societies, we often have women drivers telling us that they're driving, and if they have a male passenger, the passenger will refuse to get in the car or tell the woman to get up and let them drive because they don't want to be driven by a woman. So that kind of bias. And then there are the measures that platforms take that often very much backfire on the very women that they're trying to help integrate into this economy. So for instance, there's a platform in India, and this is a matter of public record, they've written about it, Swiggy, which felt that to keep its women's workforce safe, they needed to not allow them to work after dark. And so all women were automatically just signed out. This is a food delivery platform. And this effectively meant that women weren't able to get access to the dinner rush, and their salaries were their earnings were much lower. So these kind of measures that platforms do that they feel are well-intentioned actually make it very difficult for women to do this type of work, because as we all know, the gig economy it's tight. The more work you do, the more money you earn. The less work you do, the less money you earn. And often times it doesn't make sense unless you earn a certain amount. What we find is that there's really a very simple fix to this. Platforms really should consult with women-led worker collectives who are really just a fount of information both on the challenges faced by women, but they've also devised solutions for them. And I'm going to give you two examples. One is in the Philippines again, there was a motorbike taxi worker collective, and they actually created a divider which stopped passengers from being able to hold onto the driver's waist. And that in turn reduced not just sexual harassment, but also robberies. There's another collective in Nigeria, which is really looking at the challenges that women are facing when it comes to getting loans without a male co-signer. And that's a big issue for if you want to work in the ride-hailing market, because you often have to buy a car. And if you don't have a male family member who's willing to co-sign it with you, then you can't get it. So they're now setting up self-help groups to combat these issues. And it would just be much easier for these women if the platforms were not just encouraging the formation of these collectives, but actually engaging with them and talking to them about potential solutions to the kind of challenges that women are actually struggling with.
Thank you, Anjali. Very interesting how agency can help in the participation rate of women. And I think even Shikoh mentioned it as one of the 3 key lenses that we have. And I want to shift gears a bit and go to Alem. You are a founder of a Jobtech platform. You know firsthand how it is to walk the talk. So could you just paint a picture of what it means? What are the opportunities and challenges that exist?
Thanks, Janet. I hope you can hear me here. I'm in our office, so I can get loud a little bit. So I apologize in advance if there is any background. So we are primarily a pink and blue collar gig platform, which is, I think we're referring to the domestic help works where traditionally it's taken by women in our community, in our culture. And the blue collars are the home repair services. So the opportunities, I think I can say we are seeing is that we're just starting shedding light on this informal sector, which is estimated to be a third of the GDP in terms of size in Ethiopia. So some of the things, realities we are exposing now is how unfair the payment is for when it comes to domestic help. And by our true nature, what we want to match gig workers for is for time boxed or task-based gigs, so that we can help them get more opportunities, more engagement, so that they can increase their incomes. So the first thing we are now looking at is how low the pay is when you try to kind of look at it at hourly rate. It's too low. And on the flip side, we're also seeing the challenge in kind of doing customer education when it comes to this nature of our gig platform, because traditionally we are used to, in Ethiopia, we're used to having living mates, right? So we lose most of our inbound calls or connections because our customers are immediately expecting to have a living mate who would live and work for them, for long hours. In some cases, it's pretty inhuman, to be honest. So we're fighting that fight where we're doing the customer education. At the same time, we are seeing this high demand for domestic help, which by itself is a great market opportunity. But when it comes to matching, we still have to do this intervention or like kind of bridging communication between employers and women who are looking for these domestic help gigs, because traditionally there is this kind of power dynamics where the employer will be dictating the terms of employment or engagement, and women are often kind of not at liberty to state their terms. So the conversation you might think it's going well, but women are going to really not speak up and really state their terms for that engagement, and connection fail in these cases. We have to come in and like really bridge the communication to help One, bring the payment to an acceptable amount for the women to be able to work, and also the hours in other factors. So in Ethiopia, it's very common to see a lot of, unemployment is pretty high. At the same time, employers often complain about finding, candidates for positions, or even in our sector, for, to find help at home or home repairs, things like that. But what we are also seeing is how, this kind of reverse job paradox, where employers are trying to pay lower, and it becomes unreasonable to the point where gig workers drop it. This is more amplified on, when it comes to the pink collar gigs. So we are seeing, I would say, we are seeing the opportunity, we're shedding light, but things are still volatile the way we see it, because we are still at the early stage of really streamlining. It's by its nature an informal sector, so we are still at that very edge, but we see the opportunity, the potential, but there is so much work to be done in terms of customer education, and actually really creating some kind of stability in pricing, hourly rate, things like that.
Thanks, Alem. I think that's some very, very good insights. And an interesting finding that we did find in our report is that care services end up earning 50% more. People who are in care services end up earning 50% more compared to people who are just in cleaning services. I don't know if you've seen this pattern in Ethiopia with GoodayOn. Is it something that you experience more of?
Yes, that's true. Usually, care services come along with additional, they require more trust. There is more trust involved with it. So usually when it comes to care services, employers will demand traditionally kind of someone who will be a guarantor to hire that person. So involving that, and also there are now more customers are demanding to have someone who's trained and certified. So when you couple these two things, you immediately this increased benefit in terms of compensation for those care services. Whereas in cleaning, something interesting is that the pays are low, but they are more frequent. They have high demand, they have more frequency. So the only challenge would be really having this supply and demand balance in the marketplace in our platform, and actually ensuring that those women in cleaning services get more frequent calls and engagements. But that's exactly we're seeing kind of similar pattern there.
Cool, thank you so much. And speaking about demand and supply, I want to go back to you, Nadina. Earlier on, you spoke about online freelancing work, and we've seen this has attracted a lot of women. Could you explain more about the opportunity that exists there, and if there are any challenges for that?
Yes, of course. And actually, opportunity is a good word, and it's a good word for this context we are in, because if we look at the demand side, let's go the other side. I talked a little bit about workers. Let's talk about who are the clients and where they come from. If we stay in this realm of online gig economy, and I mentioned that clients in the platform can be from all over the world, of course. One trend is clear: developed countries tend to dominate when it comes to the demand for online gig work. So that's where most of the tasks are asked for. But what we do see, we looked at data from a major online gig work platform, and we found that for the past 5 years, demand actually has grown at the fastest rate in Sub-Saharan Africa. So, that means that more and more companies, whether, very small from a single-owned company to bigger companies, they are starting to look for online gig workers and are starting to put out tasks out there. Actually, in Sub-Saharan Africa itself, we saw that the growth in demand was 130%, so more than double over 5 years, which is an important trend. And at the same time, if we compare with North America, for instance, the growth was much lower and significantly lower in comparison. So one thing to keep in mind is that, of course, the market is developing. It's still in an emerging state, but at the same time, there is a lot of interest in this economy, and that's interest stemming from the continent itself, which I think is an important aspect to keep in mind. Another aspect I would like to bring to this conversation about opportunities is if we turn to the worker side. I talked about flexibility and how that is useful for women, but another aspect that we found, and that was to a certain extent surprising, let's say, is that if we look at where workers come from within a country, whether it's the capital or it's smaller cities, we found that actually quite a few tend to come from other cities within the country, not the capital or the main cities. Of course, that story depends very much if we talk about connectivity. With the one thing that people need to access these jobs is access to the internet, access to equipment. So, the story might be spotty from country to country, but one thing is certain: if you have access to the internet, it's likely that you could spread these opportunities to people who live in more remote areas of the country. So that's on the opportunities. Now for the challenges. And Anjali covered them very well for the location-based platforms. When it comes to online gig work, we see that a bunch of challenges are related to access to benefits. Whether we talk about social protection, so healthcare insurance, retirement plans, all of these tend to be out of the reach of workers, of online gig workers. Other aspects that are still out of the reach are, for instance, access to training, access to credit. We've actually talked to gig workers, and we found that they're really looking for both aspects, both the traditional benefits when we talk about healthcare and accidental insurance and so on and so forth, but also the other side that would help them grow in their business. So, getting more skills and getting access to money to actually finance their growth in this field. So those, I would say, to keep it briefly, I would say those are the major challenges that we are facing. And, I could turn to solutions, but maybe we can come back to that later. And yeah, I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Cool, thank you so much. And I like that you set the stage for me. So the next step is thinking about what needs to be done. What can we do to change the aspect? Because we've spoken about the obstacles, we've spoken about the opportunities and the challenges. And maybe we can start with Anjali. You mentioned some obstacles that women face in location-based platforms, like ride-hailing platforms. What are some of these practical steps that policymakers, regulatory institutions need to take in order to protect women who are working in this sector?
So most countries in the world already have spent a lot of time thinking about how to gender mainstream, how to improve the situation for women. And through that, they have passed certain laws like guaranteeing maternity leave or ensuring a minimum wage floor, which is actually one of the most effective ways to tackle the gender pay gap, and outlawing gender-based discrimination. However, at the same time, most location-based platforms do not need to rise to this level. They do not need to meet these laws because they hire workers as independent contractors oftentimes, and they're not understood as proper workers. And what I really do believe is that regulatory institutions and policymakers really need to think about how they can apply these pre-existing laws to the platforms and make sure that they can't find loopholes to not meet these things. And this is not just a matter of, not backsliding on these hard-fought battles to like gender mainstream, but it's also to recognize that if you don't regulate this particular economy, this digital economy, you're effectively trapping women into insecure, poorly paid jobs where they can never quite fully live up to their potential.
Thanks, Anjali. And if we shift this to looking inwards, looking at the women themselves, what can be done to support them? And I want to bring in Nadina to just give some insights about this, because I had you mention a bit of it in the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. So I was mentioning challenges, right? And what women are lacking, what gig workers in general are lacking, but also more specifically women. And one thing I would like to focus more on is this aspect of training and access to credit. We ran, as part of our study, we ran a big survey and we asked actually respondents their thoughts on this question. So if you were to choose, what would you like to have? Would you like to have health insurance, retirement plan, training, financial services targeted to you, etc. And what was interesting is that, of course, there was a combination always of all of these elements, but in a lot of cases, the training and access to financial services, access to credit, were things that came out quite on top. And in a sense, that is clear, right? For a lot of people, and I think, again, I'm going to go back to what Shikoh said, because she put it in such a nice way in the beginning. For a lot of women, especially, who join this work, this is a way to make more for themselves, not just to survive from one way to the other, but also to try to grow. And what do you need to grow? You need to learn new skills to keep yourself always updated to what the market demands, and you need also access to credit. We've actually seen very interesting stories talking also to women, and one particular comes to mind now. We talked to a woman online freelancer in Pakistan, and essentially she started off doing this work just because she couldn't find a job in her field, that was software development actually, in the local labor market. So she looked for opportunities, and she found out that she can actually join platforms and try to work her way into a career in her field this way. And while she did struggle in the beginning, of course, after getting the hang of it and growing her business, she decided that she didn't want to do it just for herself, but she actually set up an agency where she was also helping other women who were trying to get into this market, explaining to them what they should do, how they should build their profile, and so on and so forth. So this is where I'm getting, with you want to grow in this sector, you want to grow your income, but maybe you also want to be a bit of an entrepreneur, let's say, at the end of the day. To talk about training on the one hand, of course, one thing that is essential are the technical skills that women need, those in-demand skills in the market. But at the same time, what we found is that also the softer skills, the social emotional skills, are essential for this. And this can include things that might be taken for granted, like how you manage your time, how you manage clients, how you negotiate. All these things are also important in order to strive in the market. On the side of access to finance, another team in the World Bank called CGAP, they have done a lot of work on this, and they show that I think over half of the women they talked to mentioned that access to finance is a critical challenge they face. And when I talk to access to finance, especially for women, there are two things to consider. Of course, loans can help and targeted benefits, but more specifically, when we design solutions for them, there are two things to keep in mind, or perhaps one main thing to keep in mind. Then that is the fact that for many women who work on this market tend to have dependents, children, for instance. So it's not enough to give, for instance, health insurance to a woman, but rather think of a benefits package that also cover their dependents, so that if their children are sick, they can still, they don't have to completely cut off earning their livelihoods for the time their children are sick. But they're also covered through insurance plans that account for this. And this is just one example. Of course, on the other side of the road, the loans, access to targeted loans are also an important component, whether we talk about the online gig economy, where buying a new laptop might be essential, but also to other parts of the job tech landscape, whether we talk about women who work on e-commerce platforms, on location-based platforms. That is an essential component to think of.
Agreed. Thank you so much for painting that very good picture, Nadina. And so we've spoken about support organizations, policymakers, we've spoken about the women themselves, but how about the platform? So Alem, I just want you to close the conversation by letting us know what role do platforms have in overcoming some of these barriers?
Thanks. So the first thing is actually understanding especially I'm going to speak about this informal sector that we're really focused in. So some of this context might differ, but really understanding the cultural norms and kind of barriers that are really ingrained, really understanding and providing solutions that would kind of circumvent them, would help. That instance I gave where even though domestic workers are connected through an app, through a platform, we still track it and try to kind of mediate the conversation between the employer and the gig worker. Those things are really important because until we are in that state where established as kind of a society that really have mechanisms to address these gaps, those are really essential factors to consider. And the other thing I see at a very small scale that are really fruitful are opportunities that are kind of presented in terms of training. This is something Nadina touched on. For example, culturally, women, domestic workers, because they are living with their employers, they do not have this financial literacy or really managing their own livelihood by living by themselves. So providing financial literacy training and also the customer service skills, those are very crucial because as our development as a country is progressing, we're seeing that customer base who needs this tailored services, it's growing. So for this to continue growing in this direction, getting those trainings are really crucial in providing them. And just one thing I want to touch on that. So the way we see it, because the pink collar sectors, women traditionally have been doing this for themselves, maybe at home growing up. So they have, I would say, traditionally the expertise, be it cooking, cleaning, things like the home services. They are experts technically, but what's really lacking is actually coupling it or tipping it with this customer service skill and how they manage their time, things like that. So trainings that I have seen working are those which are really embedded into their engagements. But on the other side, I am seeing practices of training where, such trainings are provided in classrooms setting, physically keeping them idle, or for them, it's they see it as getting kept idle because they would rather make some money rather than sitting and listening to someone teach them about customer service. So that kind of agile way of training them, especially in this informal sector, has been really effective from our experience in the last 3 years. And when it comes to financial literacy, really, in being a self-employed or a gig worker, the vision, I think, for almost everyone is to be able to make enough money to the point where they can kind of move up a little bit and start their own self-employment kind of business. So arranging those kind of financial loans, things like that, based on their track records and success, is also something that everyone asks us in. It's part of the package we offer to those gig workers with good track record, and those are areas where we see really that can be done better, especially when it comes to the informal sector. The inputs needed are very minimal, but we just have to be careful how we present it to them. So those are the things I would mention. Thank you.
Thank you, Alem. So now, being cognizant of time, I want to open the floor to one or two very burning questions to the team. So I'm checking the chats. I see no questions. I want to open the floor. You can feel free to unmute yourself and just raise your hand to ask. any question that you may have. Okay, cool. I'll just move us along. And thank you so much, panelists, for giving us such rich insights on the topic at hand. And I want to hand it over back to Phoebe.
Thank you so much, Janet, and thank you for all the panelists and all the points that you have raised today. Some of the ones that have really stood out to me was a statement that was made by Anjali on the importance of consulting these women-led collectives when you're designing solutions that work for women, right? How some people, even with the best intentions, can create solutions that don't necessarily solve the problem that they wanted to solve and only make the situation worse. And the importance of having these partnerships to fill in the gaps in the places that you do not know you have gaps. Also really interesting to hear that there's growing demand here in Africa for these roles. A lot of the work that we've done and some of the work that we continue to do is look for these opportunities abroad. And while that is still important in the short term, it's great to know that it is growing locally and there is something that they would be able to do even here. And lastly, the importance of training. This is something that we have seen on our own, and it is really interesting to hear how important it is, even from Alem mentioning that on the ground, this is something that is demanded in quite a big way, including access to capital. So thank you so much for all of that. And while we're closing off, I just wanted to bring your attention to just a couple of reports. We have launched the Gender Jobtech Landscape Scan, and feel free to click on it. You will see a link on your screen, on your chat, and have a look at what we are working on, the kind of insights that we have, and also recommendations to policymakers, research institutions, platforms themselves, governments, and so on. We also have the S4YE Working Without Borders report that was mentioned before by Nadina. Please have a look at it. The link is also in the chat. And lastly, the Fairwork's Gender and Platform Work Report, Beyond Techno-Solutionism, also a really interesting piece of work. Have a look at it and feel free to continue sharing your insights. All of this will be uploaded on our platform and our website. So have continue to engage us there and on LinkedIn across all our different social media channels as well. So thank you all for joining us today. We hope this has been great and you've learned something that you can apply. And yeah, goodbye. Thank you.